14 men and 14 women are dropped onto a deserted island, each allowed only a few specific pieces of equipment. They must survive there for 40 days, facing constantly changing harsh environments, finding food, and building shelters. Comparatively, the women's arrival might spark interesting interactions against the slightly stronger men. Let's wait and see. Boarding a small yacht piloted by Bear himself, 14 young men of various ages head towards the island. The contestants are ordinary people from various professions with little to no survival experience. Upon arrival, they dive into the water without hesitation, their adrenaline surging with excitement. Some, having watched a few survival shows, even save their urine in case they can't find water. Once everyone is safely ashore, Bear speeds away without looking back, leaving them to film everything themselves. With night approaching in a few hours, they must quickly find a place to stay overnight. They introduce themselves on a flat area. Among them are 2 doctors and 2 construction workers, beneficial for team survival. Meanwhile, 14 young women are also heading to the island. Bear, suppressing a smile, gently reminds these ladies, who have hardly watched such shows, let alone survive on an island for 40 days. Upon arrival, they are very cautious, repeatedly confirming the water depth with Bear, and some are even scared to tears. After comforting them, Bear watches as they jump into the water with their limited gear and head to shore. Without a clear route, they start making friends, chatting non-stop, much to the distant Bear's amusement. To avoid trouble, Bear quickly leaves. Now, the 14 women must survive on this island. The island has plenty of fresh water and food, but they must find it themselves. Half an hour after reaching the shore, someone suggests they need to start moving. They head deeper into the jungle, but face disagreements on the route, each disregarding the other's feelings. When someone encounters a snake, a piercing scream scares everyone. Jaime cries from the fright, but with her teammates' encouragement, they continue. Soon, they find a large wild cassava root, rich in carbohydrates, and decide to take it with them. As they continue, the path becomes crowded. Without finding an open beach, they reluctantly settle for the night in the jungle. After clearing the undergrowth, and before they can set up shelters, it starts raining heavily, soaking their clothes. Desperate, they pull out a waterproof cloth and huddle under it to stay dry. Back with the men, they too encounter a snake. Paul wants to kill it with a knife, but since the camp isn't set up yet, he decides against it. With less than an hour until dark and only 400 meters advanced, to avoid spending the night with jungle insects, Paul urges everyone to pick up the pace. Someone leads with a machete to clear the path. After 2.5 hours of continuous walking, they finally see a light ahead. Emerging onto the much-anticipated beach, the relief is overwhelming. Paul can't help but cry, and the others, feeling reborn, jump into the sea to enjoy the cleansing waters, a stark contrast to the jungle.
That's a whale. It's a whale. Wow.
As night falls, without a camp, they can only sleep on the ground. In such conditions, a good night's sleep is out of the question. Somehow, they manage to make it to the next morning. After a whole day of trekking yesterday, their emergency drinking water is almost depleted. Fortunately, it's the storm season on the island, and fresh water sources are found in nearly every area. However, this water cannot be consumed directly and must be boiled. The group gathers on the beach to discuss their plan. Dan suggests that their first task is to start a fire to maintain their water supply. Besides that, they need to find edible food. After assigning tasks, they get to work. Engineers Dan and builder Andy are responsible for starting the fire using traditional friction methods. Unfortunately, due to the poor quality of the rope they found, they fail to start the fire. Meanwhile, others at the shore have collected many snails, which will likely be their dinner. After 2.5 hours of effort, they enjoy their dinner in the afternoon, eating raw sashimi due to the lack of a fire. Additionally, due to dehydration, some people's urine has turned dark yellow, a sure sign of trouble. Despite their best efforts, they can't get the tinder to ignite. Then a teammate comes up with an idea to use a magnifying glass to focus the sun's rays. This ingenious method works, and the tinder finally smokes. Andy carefully blows air into it until a small flame sparks, a hard-earned success. With the fire, survival becomes a bit easier. Thanks to this innovative approach, they quickly boil fresh water and eagerly fill their stomachs. Meanwhile, in the women's camp, continuous heavy rain lasts until midnight. Due to the cold temperature, they have to start a fire earlier than planned. With no other useful tools at hand, they resort to using a bow drill to create fire, a process that takes 3 hours. Everyone takes turns, and after 4 hours, they successfully start a small fire, exciting the team. The first thing they do with the fire is not to hydrate but to dry their wet clothes. By the next morning, as Julie says, they hardly slept at all, and many crabs crawled on them. It was their first night outdoors, and thanks to the cassava they found during the day, they roast it for breakfast in the morning. Although it's not as tasty as their usual meals, it's enough to fill their stomachs. As the saying goes, one man's joy is another man's sorrow. Due to the rampant mosquitoes in the jungle, many are bitten, causing 25-year-old Jade to consider quitting, thinking that young people lack resilience. Fortunately, her teammates are supportive and actively persuade her not to give up so quickly. However, their emergency water supply is now depleted, and they must discuss how to obtain fresh water. Kate suggests they find the beach first, as staying in one place makes it easy to get bitten. After half an hour of discussion, they select a few to search for the beach, with Kate leading. Considering there is a mangrove ahead, she concludes that continuing in that direction would be futile. Moreover, they did not bring water, which could easily lead to danger. For safety, they decide to return the same way. Suddenly, one of their teammates, Fran, collapses due to poor health. The others rush to the camp to help her, putting the mission to find the beach on hold. As time passed, the men's team encountered a severe storm. Although they had a fire, they lacked a shelter, and the storm arrived as expected. They hurriedly protected the fire, determined not to let the rain extinguish it. Night fell, and the heavy rain continued. Everyone began to build shelters, facing unfortunate weather right from the start. However, during the busy work, Andy often disappeared alone, which Paul had noticed earlier, posing a disadvantage for the team. They endured the rain until the next day, with barely anyone sleeping, but they managed to keep the fire alive. The unexpected severe weather led some, including Joe, the youngest at 22, to consider quitting. After a challenging night, Joe missed his family. Noticing Joe's mood, a teammate immediately hugged him to stabilize his emotions. Due to 2 days of continuous rain, the women had not yet left the jungle, leading to frequent mosquito bites. The stronger women might cope, but the younger ones struggled. Early in the morning, the beautiful Jade gathered everyone, unable to tolerate the jungle environment any longer, and proposed quitting. Her teammates tried to persuade her, but Jade was determined, with no major physical issues. She simply wanted to go home. Reluctantly, her teammates called to withdraw her from the competition. Soon, a yacht sped from the sea to pick her up. Following her departure, the remaining contestants discussed their next steps. With the local water sources depleted and the jungle unsuitable for living, their immediate task was to find the beach. Fee, a 58-year-old forestry worker, decided to lead 7 teammates on this mission, while the rest stayed to guard the campfire. Fi planned to head right, through the dense jungle to the other side of the island. They rushed and only took 2 cups of water, not enough to last long in the heat. Fi, experienced and older, led the way. After 2.5 hours, they reached the bright, open, and beautiful beach they had longed for, perfect for setting up camp. They immediately enjoyed the moment, stripping down and swimming, the fatigue seeming to vanish. They also found many coconuts, quenching their thirst after the long trek. Although the coconuts were refreshing, their quantity was limited. As the sun set, they had not found a new water source. Returning was impossible, so they slept on the beach. At 3 a.m., it started raining heavily. They huddled under palm leaves, shivering until morning. Back at the camp, the situation was frustrating as the hard-earned fire was extinguished by the rain. Experience was not the issue. 4 or 5 women couldn't even preserve the fire. However, they didn't realize the severity of the situation, instead feeling fortunate for the rainwater they could drink. Meanwhile, a few by the shore searched for a new water source. Following the direction of a stream on the beach, they walked into the jungle and found a small pond of fresh water, which excited everyone. This meant they could permanently settle on the beach. Having identified a water source and a place to stay, several people needed to return to the old location to bring the others. This meant re-entering the jungle, where getting lost was easy without landmarks. To prevent this, Phi made marks along their path. At a crossroads, disagreement arose. Phi insisted on moving forward, but her teammates thought they should head east. Since Phi had led them initially, they temporarily followed her, but it turned out to be the wrong decision, leading them further away from the camp. Unaware, they continued calling out for their teammates as they walked, but after 2.5 hours, Kate realized Phi was wrong, and they should be going in the opposite direction. This led to an argument between them. With no return after 24 hours, those at the camp grew very worried. Lacking fresh water and fire, they hadn't eaten in over 4 days. Fran, unable to cope, nearly broke down. Julie thought Fran was being dramatic, which led to an argument when Fran couldn't help but cry. Julie didn't expect such agility from young people. Meanwhile, the exploration team found a stream but were shocked to discover a crocodile lying in it. They had never been so close to a crocodile, let alone fight one with knives, so they had to leave the protein source untouched and bypass the river. Half an hour later, dehydrated, they returned to the shore, where they luckily found some coconuts to rehydrate before moving on. Back at camp, the remaining people were restless, afraid to leave in case their teammates returned and couldn't find them. Lying around wasn't solving their water and food issues, so Abby decided to build a tent for shelter from potential rain. However, lacking experience, their makeshift structure quickly collapsed, demoralizing everyone. The others continued their difficult journey, increasingly disoriented by the jungle, and eventually circling back to their starting point. Despite consulting the map, they still couldn't find the right path. Knowing they couldn't just lie around, the camp decided to try starting a fire. But the bow drill failed immediately. For the elderly, Julie, things seemed manageable. She even washed teammates' underwear in the morning. However, considering she did more work, she felt it was unfair, leading to more arguments. As a storm approached, people on the shore began collecting plastic bottles, a potential source of precious water. Another night passed, and they picked coconuts for breakfast again. The long-awaited rain finally came at noon, and they hurriedly used their bottles to collect water. Having not eaten for 4 days, this water was their only hope for survival. After rehydrating and packing several large bottles of water, they continued their search for the camp. Along the way, they argued frequently about directions. Ultimately, they agreed to let Kate lead the way back. Meanwhile, at the other camp, a crisis occurred due to severe dehydration. Young Fran collapsed and her teammates quickly called for rescue. A yacht soon arrived at the shore. After a preliminary checkup, Fran was temporarily taken aboard the yacht, with the possibility of returning to the competition if she recovered. The remaining 4 teammates waited anxiously on the shore. Fortunately, Fran safely returned to camp. Realizing the dangers of staying further, the group discussed going to find the others, hoping to gather resources along the way. They quickly packed and set off, planning to move north along the coast. Under Kate's leadership, the other group unexpectedly returned to their starting point, a precise navigation feat. This led to frustration among the team members, who felt stranded after 3 days of walking with no progress. Just as they were breaking down, their teammates found them. A sharp shout rejuvenated everyone, and they ran to embrace each other, relieved to reunite after 3 days. Now, they could finally rest. The men's camp faced continuous heavy rain for 2 days and nights, nearly destroying their camp and sinking spirits. Today's task was to urgently find a suitable campsite. Hopes were pinned on architects Andy and Paul, but their ideas differed significantly. Andy wanted to build the shelter on the beach for better hunting and views, while Paul felt that living on the beach was akin to suicide, as storms and waves could destroy tents. After considering both opinions, the rest felt safer in the jungle. Led by Paul, they began gathering materials to build shelters. The initial process went smoothly, but soon young Joe lost his motivation, weakened by 2 days without food. After a mild rebuke from a teammate, Joe angrily walked to the beach to call to quit the competition. However, rain forced everyone to stop and focus on preserving their fire source. Once the weather cleared, Joe made the call to withdraw, reflecting a lack of resilience among the young. The rest resumed building shelters, but Paul and Andy disagreed fiercely on the plans. As builders, both were convinced of their correctness, leading to unnecessary arguments and a deadlock. The shelter project stalled, and Paul, unable to tolerate the disagreement, also decided to quit. During a team meeting, aside from Joe waiting for a boat, Paul announced his intention to withdraw due to unresolved conflicts with Andy. The argument escalated, and Andy also decided to quit. Despite attempts to mediate, the outcome couldn't be changed. Paul and Joe were the first to leave the competition, quickly returning home by yacht. Now, only 12 contestants remain on the men's team. Encouraged by his teammates, Andy decided to stay. By the fourth day, they had barely eaten anything and needed to find food. Fish were often seen swimming near the shore, but without spears, catching them was difficult.
Get it. Okay, go! Get him! Oh, Andy, get him! Get him behind it. Oh, cut him off. Get him!
Meanwhile, another team spotted a large iguana. They attempted to knock it down with a stick, but due to poor aim, they failed. The group by the shore also spent half a day trying to catch something, but ended up burning thousands of calories for nothing. As night fell, strong winds picked up, followed by heavy rain. With no food, they also had to protect the fire from going out. Sleep was impossible. On the fifth day, Andy complained about the weather after a sleepless night, which was tough for a man over 50. This led him to consider quitting, but his teammates quickly comforted him, knowing they couldn't afford another dropout. They offered to build him a single bed so he could sleep better, and Andy decided to wait a few more days before making a decision. On the other side, Vic was leading a team to hunt crocodiles, hoping for a big meal if they found one. However, after searching the island, they found only lively scorpions and disease-ridden black bats with no edible protein. The group then tried their luck fishing at the shore. Kie claimed to have seen a crocodile on the beach, so they split into two groups to ambush it. After waiting 2.5 hours, the crocodile never appeared, and they returned to camp frustrated. Others tried fishing from the rocks. They almost caught a fish, but it escaped during the struggle, turning their only gain into nothing. Back at camp, Andy and his teammates had constructed a single bed, though it seemed likely to fall apart at night. Meanwhile, Charlie suddenly yelled out after his foot was stung by something. For safety, Sam called for help, but the culprit was just another scorpion. The injury wasn't severe, so the rescue team didn't bother, but Charlie was immobilized for the next few days, needing help even to walk. With less than an hour until dark and needing food for the evening, young Barney and Ross decided to go fishing on the rocky shore. The waves were rough, crashing every few seconds. They hoped to catch a big fish in these conditions, but a wave swept Ross into the sea, losing the camera in the process. Another wave knocked Barney over, ruining another expensive camera. Disheartened, they returned to camp without any catch, and with 2 lost cameras. Before going to sleep, they shared their ordeal with everyone. Fortunately, no one blamed them, but this made Andy reconsider his participation. Concerned about his own safety, he called to withdraw the next morning. Andy's decision angered his teammates, who even suspected that Paul's earlier departure was just an excuse. However, they couldn't stop someone who wanted to leave. With Architect Andy's departure, only 11 contestants remain on the men's team. Their strength appears quite weak, having not caught any protein for 5 consecutive days. Out of desperation, someone decided to catch a scorpion and roast it over a fire. Dan didn't hesitate to eat it, though it tasted a bit strange. Those who couldn't stomach it continued to go hungry. Later, Sam and Barney planned to go to the shore to gather seafood, hoping to pick up some snails for dinner. Instead, they found a lizard hiding in a crevice, trembling. Catching it would mean a decent meal, so they divided the tasks and started prodding it with sticks. Sam, quick and agile, successfully captured it. Surprisingly, their turned into a feast. They brought it back to camp, showing it off to their incredulous teammates, then roasted it over the fire. Having starved for so long, finally having meat to eat made everyone deeply appreciative. Although each person only got about a bite, it signified significant progress. The women's team had been surviving on the island for a week, consuming hardly any nutritious food. Since the two teams had only just merged on this new beach, they hadn't found a water source yet. Women typically need about 2 to 4 liters of fresh water daily, and without enough water, they could experience severe dehydration and dizziness. However, they were all too lethargic to act, even close to dying of thirst. Unable to stand it any longer, Georgie led a group to search for water. They plunged into the jungle but found no water source, only 2 small wild pigs under a tree. Knowing that fierce mother pigs might be nearby, They decided not to risk catching them for lunch and returned empty-handed to camp. Later that afternoon, Georgie decided to try her luck again, knowing she couldn't rely on her teammates. Walking about 2 kilometers along the coast, they luckily found droplets of water on rocks, confirmed to be fresh water, and quickly drank their fill before even thinking of filtering it. They returned to camp and shared the news. But since there was no fire yet, everyone hesitated, fearing the risk of diarrhea from unboiled water. They decided to start a fire first, using the old method of friction with a bow drill. Half an hour later, they successfully produced smoke, and the fire starting went smoothly. They placed the cans full of fresh water on the fire to boil. Just as they thought their troubles were over, a terrible scream was heard. Rushing over, they found that a water can had exploded, scalding a teammate's arm. She cooled her burn in the water for several minutes. The injury wasn't severe, and they treated it with spray from the first aid kit. She could continue as long as it wasn't too serious. Once the water boiled, they could finally hydrate properly. Thinking they were lucky to find a water source, they were surprised when the 2 pigs they had seen earlier showed up at camp, running around as if not afraid of humans. After a week of hunger, the idea of having these pigs for lunch was tempting. However, you could predict the outcome. The women found the piglets too cute to harm. Jaime, a vegetarian at home, thought killing the pigs was a terrible sin. Resistant to taking life, they decided to keep the pigs as pets and even named them. This decision was quite astonishing,